Hello. Today I'm going to do a little tutorial on how to resolve the issue I've coined dead clutch on the Honda XR100. So obviously you can't see or feel the tension, but this clutch is absolutely dead. It's not doing anything. The quickest way to identify if you have the same problem that I have right now is to look on your clutch cover. And this little bolt that comes through does have a purpose. It is an adjuster, and my bolt has fallen off that nut. And as you can see, this is, it might be hard to see, but this bolt is kind of free to move around. That's ultimately the issue that we're going to correct. So the first thing we're going to do is, I do not plan to drain the oil. So the first thing that we're going to do, and you can take this cover off without removing the pipe or taking the motor out. All you need to do is loosen up this rear foot peg assembly, get this and the foot peg out of the way, and then as soon as the Kickstarter is taken off, that clutch cover will slide right off. So we'll get going with this assembly first. First thing is we're going to remove this top bolt completely. Now I've gone ahead and loosened up this lower bolt already, and this top one's ready to come out. As soon as this comes out, your peg's going to drop, and this gas pedal, you can kind of just maneuver this out of the way for now. Just like that. We're going to disconnect the cable from this little clutch lever here, and then once we take the Kickstarter off, we'll be ready to go ahead and remove the cover. I got the cable disconnected from the little lever. It either takes you 10 seconds or 10 minutes. I got the screw backed off on the Kickstarter. This just pulls right out. Now I'm just going to go ahead and lay this bike on its side all the way, put a little blanket underneath it, and then we'll get this cover off. Before I go any further, I gotta suggest, always work on a clean bike. I almost caught myself about to take this cover off with loose dirt and crap everywhere, and even though this is an indestructible Honda, you don't want that stuff in there, so we're going to give her a quick spray down. Okay, we're back in position, and I have no idea where my freaking socket is. What the fuck? We'll deal with that later, but for now, good old T-wrench. I'm going to take all these off, but I'm not going to pull the bolts out. I'm going to leave the bolts in the cover, and I'll show you why as soon as I get this off. Okay, all my bolts are loose. I'm going to leave everything in. If ever your cover is a little stuck, just use a little rubber mallet. Kind of break that seal a little bit. Last thing you ever want to do is stick a screwdriver in between that case. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen this up a little bit. And once it is loose, I'm just going to pull everything straight out. It's going to come through your Kickstarter gear here. And then I'm going to take this whole case and move it over to my workbench. Okay, we got the cover off. Luckily, it looks like my gasket is still in pretty good condition. It's not ripped or smushed or squashed. I just put a new clutch in here. This is the culprit to this dead clutch issue. We're going to pull this out and put this back on the table. And then I'm just going to cover this up a little bit for protection. Now this step might seem a little silly, but I like to put my case on a cover, mark it out, and just lay these bolts out like this. These are 3 different size bolts, and it just makes it a little quicker when I go to put this thing back on. So this is the inside of the cover. If you've never had this clutch cover open before, this is actually the mechanism that when you pull the clutch, it engages this. And it's got this little rocker arm here that this piece technically sits underneath of. And actually it goes like this. And when you push on the clutch to pull the clutch lever, this actually rocks up, in and out. And that's what engages and disengages your clutch. Next, because we do need to get this actuator, I'm just going to call this the actuator. We do need to get that underneath here, so we're going to disassemble this. Basically, you just pull out that little cotter pin, and this whole assembly slides out. The spring does have some tension on it, so when you put it back in, you got to make sure it goes back in the same way. And then I want to point out this. So if you notice how this little tab on the right is bent, I'm not sure exactly how it's happening, but that somehow is what's causing, or a part of what's causing this issue. And you'll notice this little piece here, it just kind of slides underneath these grooves. And that's where it kind of gets the cantilever action from. So we're actually going to take this apart and kind of straighten this up a little bit. Now I know I just said I was going to take this apart, but this piece technically doesn't actually come apart. So you kind of got to work these tabs back in with your fingers, just kind of rework it. And real quick, this is a super interesting piece of engineering, how they designed this. This does actually adjust the point at which it actuates. And this little piece here is what sticks out of the cover. So I think I got this fairly straightened back out. I might try to rework this a little bit, but otherwise this piece here is pretty much good to go. The one thing I do need to go do is hit my local hardware store and get a little bolt and a lock washer for this. Side note, I just found my 10mm socket. So I got that little cotter pin pulled out, and I'm going to show you that really all you got to do is, well, it does have a little groove that's got to get lined up. Yeah, you'll see here in a second, but basically this just pulls out. I kind of just leave everything there, but you'll notice this is actually slotted. So when it goes back in, you need to make sure it's lined up properly with this. I'm just going to leave it loose like that. Now I'm going to go hit the hardware store. Be right back. Got my nut, got my washer. Okay, we're back at the bench. We got all of our supplies. Before we get going and start to put this back together, I'm just going to go ahead and clean this cover out real quick, make sure it's all good and clean, get all that crap out of there. So, half a can of brake cleaner and half a can of brake cleaner, and I forgot what I was doing. Phew, okay, quick reminder, always use brake clean in a well-ventilated area, but otherwise this thing is as clean as it's going to get, so we're going to go ahead and do the reassembly. First I'm going to put through the, we'll just call this the top lever actuator. I know that's probably the technical term, so let's get it back in. Okay, so just kidding, I'm actually going to put this bottom piece in first. So it literally just kind of drops right into here into the cover. And then on the back side is where we're going to put this nut and lock washer. So we're going to start with that bottom piece. And real quick, this thing does screw and adjust. I'm going to adjust it so that it's about halfway right there. You'll notice there's some threads on top and there's some threads on the bottom. I'm going to consider that halfway. I think the last time I had this tightened all the way, and that might have been why it popped out. So now I think this is where I messed up last time. I didn't have a lock washer on there, and this time I went ahead and squirted some blue Loctite on there. Now the trick to getting this nut tight on the bolt is I'm actually going to get a little screwdriver to hold the nut steady and then tighten the bolt down until my lock washer is flat. Nuts on, lock washer is tight. That's what I use to get the job done. So next I got this piece. It just kind of slides underneath these little tabs. To be honest, I should have put this together with this at the same time, because since I put this in and then tighten it down, you almost have to bend these tabs back, right? And the whole point of taking this apart was to bend these back right. So if I was going to do this again, I would put this all together in one. But now that we're at this point, this little rocker here, you see it's got to line up. It actually is going to go in there like that. This is going to come underneath it. Whoops, I'm lying to you again. It actually flips like this. So this is the little lip. See that? So you want this little lip facing up. That little ledge is going to sit and catch it right there like that. Spring goes on. Sorry. Spring goes on, sits on top of the little bar. And I'm just going to go ahead and get this all through, and you'll see when I'm done what it's supposed to look like. Sorry for the cluster. Okay, so we got everything assembled. You can see my Spring is on top of the little bar. The little rolly doodad's got the lever up. We're gonna simulate pulling in the clutch lever right now, and you'll see how that mechanism just rocks, and eventually that piece right there is what pushes in and engages or disengages the clutch. The more you tighten or screw this little guy at the bottom from inside or outside the clutch, it's going to adjust where this sits normally. So either it's going to sit higher or lower depending on if you bring this in or out. I'm not going to mess with it too much. One thing to remember is when you're putting this in, make sure this lever is facing your oil cap. This thing will go on, it'll only go on two ways, either with this facing down or facing up. If you put it all together facing up, you're going to have a hard time getting your clutch cable back on. So, at this point, I'm going to flip this thing over, put all my screws back in the same place, and we're pretty much ready to go put this cover back on. All the right screws back in order. I'm just going to go clean up the engine side of the case, and we'll go ahead and put this back on. Now, I got my gasket all pretty much back in place. I did just put new fiber and steels in here just a couple weeks ago, so this gasket is fresh. It hasn't delaminated, it's not peeling apart. I know some guys will blow a head gasket with me reusing this gasket, but this is my bike, I'm going to do what I want. Once you got everything ready, it does take a little bit of finesse, but more or less, I'm going to figure out how to kind of just drop this all down, making sure my gasket and all my bolts are lined up at the same time. And if I need to, we'll use the soft motivator. So cover's on, everything seems to be seated pretty well. Couple tap tap taps, and we're gonna go ahead, and first thing I'm gonna do actually is just tighten down a couple of these bolts, and then I'm gonna hit this actuator, and you should be able to tell pretty clearly that you're engaging and disengaging the clutch. I got a couple bolts tight, and yes, I can tell that is engaging and disengaging the clutch. So we're going to hold and go ahead and tighten the rest of these bolts down. If you're curious about torque specs, I usually try to go with the 1 UGA, 2 UGAs. UGA. Yeah, that's tight. Again, it's my bike. I do what I want. Now we're going to go ahead and put the Kickstarter back on. We'll get the clutch back on there, and then last thing we'll do is get the foot peg and the rear brake assembly back on. Okay, Kickstarter's back on, foot peg and rear brake assemblies back on. Just remember, when you're putting your Kickstarter on, you've really got unlimited options because it's got this spline. So I just try to make sure mine's lined up nicely to where it, the end of the Kickstarters kind of comes right in here so it doesn't interfere with the clutch cable. That's the last thing I got to do to get on, and that's probably the hardest part of this whole project, is getting that cable back on that little arm right there. So that did just take me about 10 minutes. I suggest if you back off these bolts a little bit, you can give yourself a little bit more room to work with. Get that thing back in there, and then adjust that. Made some adjustments on the lever, but as you can see, we're snapping back. Everything feels good. Let's go fire it up and see if we can do a couple of wheelies. Safety. So now that we know we're good to go, we're rocking and rolling, the last thing I'm going to do is take a Sharpie and just draw a little line across it like that. And that way I can do a quick check to see if my nut is ever backing up off of that bolt. So by the way, quick little walk around. This is a 99. I picked it up. It was in beautiful condition. I took both side cases off, the swing arm and the forks, had those powder coated. It looks like a stock Honda, but it's actually a Porsche spec gray. Pretty cool. I got the BBR skid plate, the BBR chain guide. I got the Pro Taper bars. Obviously, we got the big dog barking BBR D3 exhaust. We got a fresh MX-14 on that thing. What? Shout out to the sponsor, Fish Lake Co. Go get some. I put new brakes on this thing all the way around it. Of course, it's got a new gold chain. New sprockets front and rear. I didn't replace the carb or the airbox. There's no motor work done to this bike, but I did blast out and put a couple of the little airbox little breather guys in there. I got this sweet leather gas tank cover from Argentina. Came off of eBay, 80 bucks. Get you one of those. Put the ODIs with the donuts on it, duh. And I'm lucky that my stock handguards were in decent condition. I love the look of these old handguards. If you can find me a new replacement, let me know. I'll pay top dollar. Anyway, that's my build. And I hope my little tutorial helped on how to fix what I call dead clutch on the Honda XR100. If it doesn't work for you, I don't know, too bad, that's your problem. See ya! Oh, and by the way, if anybody knows Brett Smith, tell him that I am the real 809. Thank you.